I don't know exactly when things started to go wrong. Lena and I had been together for 6 years, engaged for 2. By all accounts, we were a team, a perfect match, at least as far as I knew. We laughed at the same stupid jokes, supported each other through career changes, and even talked about the little things, like which shade of blue we'd use for the bedroom walls once she moved in. So, when she suggested a trip to South Asia with her old university friends, I didn't think much of it. In hindsight, that was my first mistake. She described it as a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, something she'd always wanted to do. "It'll be good for me," she said with that wide, excited smile I'd always loved. I didn't want to be the guy who held her back, so I encouraged her. "Go for it," I said, trying to be the supportive fiancé. What was the harm in a few weeks away with friends? I even offered to drive her to the airport and help with her luggage. That's how much I trusted her, how much I trusted us. The drive to the airport was uneventful. We talked about random things. How her suitcase seemed too small for a trip that long, whether I'd remember to water her plants, the logistics of picking her up when she returned. Everything felt normal, easy. But as we approached the security line, Lena suddenly dropped a bombshell that shattered the life we'd built together. "We need to take a break," she said. Just like that. No warning, no lead-up, no explanation. She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. At first, I thought I'd misheard her. "What?" I asked, stopping in my tracks. "A break," she repeated, avoiding my gaze. "I just need some space to think." I can't even describe the wave of confusion and panic that hit me. We were 2 weeks away from finalizing seating arrangements for our wedding, and she was talking about a break? I tried to ask what she meant, why she hadn't brought this up sooner, but she brushed me off with a quick, "We'll talk when I get back," before disappearing into the crowd. She didn't even wait for a response. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what had just happened. Was this real? Did she mean it? Or was it just pre-trip nerves? The Lena I knew wasn't impulsive or cruel. She was thoughtful, deliberate. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself she'd probably call me later to explain. But deep down, something didn't feel right. I drove home in silence, her words replaying in my head. "We need to take a break." It didn't make sense. Everything had seemed fine, perfect, even. The wedding was planned, her dress was bought, the invitation sent out. What could have changed? By the time I got home, I was convincing myself that I was overreacting. Maybe she just needed time to decompress before the wedding. She'd call, I thought. She always did. But that call never came. Hours turned into days, and days into weeks. Every time I picked up my phone to call her, I found myself blocked. On everything. Texts, calls, social media. She'd completely cut me off. I went from confusion to hurt to anger in record time. Who does that? Who decides to take a break from their fiancé 2 months before their wedding, then vanishes without a word? At first, I thought maybe she was overwhelmed. Wedding planning can be stressful, sure. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Lena hadn't just needed space. She'd abandoned me. She'd made a unilateral decision to put our relationship on pause and left me in the dark, scrambling for answers. I started replaying every conversation we'd had in the weeks leading up to her trip, searching for signs I'd missed. Had she seemed distant? Was there a fight I'd forgotten? But nothing stood out. Everything had been fine, or so I thought. Looking back now, it's almost laughable how naive I was. I kept hoping she'd call or message me, expecting an apology or at least an explanation. But all I got was silence. Radio silence from the woman I was supposed to marry. If she needed a break, fine. But blocking me? That wasn't just a break. That was walking away. And the worst part? I'd driven her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and told her to have a great time. I'd unknowingly sent her off to destroy our relationship while I stood there like an idiot, holding her carry-on bag. It was humiliating. And it was only the beginning of what turned out to be the most gut-wrenching chapter of my life. I wanted answers. I deserved answers. But as the days passed, I realized one thing. I wasn't going to get them from Lena. If she didn't want to be a part of this relationship anymore, I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to change her mind. It was time to take control of my own life, starting with the wedding. Little did I know, the fallout from this break was about to take a turn I never saw coming. When I got home from the airport, I remember sitting on the edge of our couch, staring at the wall, trying to piece together what had just happened. My fiancée, the woman I had planned a future with, had casually dropped the words, "We need to take a break," like she was ordering an extra side of fries. It didn't add up. I replayed our recent conversations, combed through every interaction, but there were no clues, no red flags, no signs that we were heading for trouble. I told myself it was probably nerves. People get weird under stress, right? I figured she'd call once she got to South Asia. Maybe say something about needing time to clear her head, and we'd work it out. That's what couples do. They communicate, they fix things. So, I waited. That first night was rough. I didn't sleep much. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was her. But when I checked, it was just group text from friends or some random spam. By the second day, the waiting started to feel like agony. I picked up my phone to call her, only to hear that cold automated message, "This number has been blocked." Blocked? It didn't make sense. I tried texting her. Nothing. Social media? Same thing. Blocked there too. At that point, confusion turned into something uglier. Anger. Who does that? Who decides to block their fiancé without so much as a conversation? I'd spent years with Lena, building trust, planning our future, and she just ghosted me? It felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I convinced myself that she'd come around. Maybe she needed a few days. I mean, she was thousands of miles away, probably jet-lagged, maybe overwhelmed by the trip. I tried to rationalize her behavior because the alternative was too painful to accept, that she had intentionally shut me out. Day 3 was when reality really started to sink in. No calls, no messages, no posts. It was like she had disappeared off the face of the earth. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the wedding invitation proofs we'd picked out together, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. I talked to a couple of close friends about it. Some told me to wait it out, that she'd probably come back with an apology and an explanation. Others told me to prepare for the worst. People don't block someone they care about, one friend said. That hit me harder than I expected. Was Lena trying to cut me out of her life entirely? By day 5, I knew what I had to do. The waiting wasn't helping. It was eating me alive. I couldn't keep living in limbo, hoping she'd swoop in with some magical explanation that would make everything okay. That's when I made the decision. The wedding was off. It wasn't an easy choice. I stared at the venue contract for hours before finally picking up the phone to cancel. It felt like I was admitting defeat, like I'd failed somehow. But deep down, I knew it wasn't my failure to own. This wasn't about me. Lena had made her choice. She chose to leave, to block, to abandon. And I wasn't going to stand around waiting for someone who didn't value our relationship enough to have an honest conversation. I went through the motions like a machine after that. I canceled the flowers, the caterer, the photographer. Each call felt like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. By the time I was done, I felt empty, like I'd poured out everything I had left into those phone calls. The silence was the hardest part. It wasn't just the lack of communication from Lena. It was the deafening quiet in our apartment, the absence of her laughter, her presence, her little quirks that used to fill the space. Everything reminded me of her, from the half-empty bottle of her favorite shampoo in the bathroom to the mug she always used for tea. I spent a lot of time pacing, trying to make sense of it all. Why hadn't she talked to me? Why didn't she feel like she could be honest? Was this really about the wedding? Or was there something deeper I'd missed? The questions swirled in my head, but no answers came. By the second week, the hurt started to transform into something else. Clarity. Lena's actions weren't just careless. They were deliberate. Blocking me wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a choice. And if she thought she could waltz back into my life after disappearing for weeks, she had another thing coming. I realized then that I deserved better. Better communication, better respect, better everything. This wasn't just about a canceled wedding or a ruined trip. It was about the kind of partnership I wanted for the rest of my life. And Lena had shown me, in no uncertain terms, that she wasn't capable of giving it. It hurt, but there was power in that realization. It gave me the strength to start letting go of the life I thought we were building together. Lena may have walked out of my life without warning, but I wasn't going to let her keep me chained to the past. If she wanted a break, she could have it, permanently. The moment I decided the wedding was off, it was like a switch flipped in my mind. Clarity replaced confusion, and anger gave way to resolve. I wasn't going to sit around, playing the role of the abandoned fiancé, waiting for Lena to come back and decide whether I was worth her time. No, if she had made the choice to block me and disappear, I'd make my own choice, to move forward without her. The first call I made was to the venue. I remember holding my breath as I waited for the receptionist to pick up, my chest tightening with every ring. "Hi, this is Alex," I said when she finally answered. My voice was steady, but my hands were trembling. "I need to cancel our wedding booking." Her response was polite but predictable. "I'm so sorry to hear that," she said, launching into a well-rehearsed script about cancellation policies and refunds. I barely heard her. My mind was racing, thinking about how real this was becoming. Canceling the venue wasn't just a logistical decision. It was the first step in undoing the life Lena and I had planned together. Next came the caterer, the photographer, the florist. With every call, I felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I was taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. Heartbreak because each cancellation felt like erasing a piece of our relationship. The cake we'd spent hours tasting, the centerpieces she had meticulously designed, the playlist we'd argued over. It all felt like a distant dream, something that belonged to another life. I thought canceling everything would be the hardest part, but it wasn't. The hardest part was explaining it to the people who needed to know. Friends, family, coworkers, they all had questions. Why was the wedding canceled? What happened? Where was Lena? At first, I tried to keep it vague. "We decided to call it off," I'd say, hoping they'd leave it at that. But they didn't. People wanted details, and eventually, I got tired of hiding the truth. So, I posted a message in the group chat we shared with friends and family. "Hey everyone," I wrote, "just a quick update. The wedding is off, and so is our relationship. Lena decided we needed a break, left for South Asia, and blocked me on everything. I'm moving on." Short, simple, and to the point. I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did. The reactions came flooding in almost immediately. Some people were shocked. "What?" one friend wrote. "Are you serious?" Others were supportive. "You deserve better," another said. "Good for you for standing up for yourself." And then there were the curious ones, asking for more details, trying to piece together the full story. I answered a few questions, but I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Lena's actions spoke louder than anything I could say. Of course, word got back to her eventually. I wasn't naive enough to think it wouldn't. What surprised me was how quickly she reached out after weeks of silence. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Hi," she said, her voice casual, like she was calling to ask about the weather. "I'm flying back on Thursday morning. Here are my flight details. Can you pick me up?" I almost laughed. Was she serious? After 5 weeks of no contact, she thought I'd drop everything to pick her up from the airport? I let her finish, then paused for a moment to let the weight of her words settle. "What's that got to do with me?" I asked, my tone calm but firm. The silence on her end was deafening. For the first time, it seemed like she didn't know what to say, and I didn't give her the chance to figure it out. I hung up and blocked her, just as she had blocked me. If she thought she could waltz back into my life like nothing had happened, she was sorely mistaken. That evening, I updated the group chat. "Just so everyone knows, Lena's trying to contact me, but I'm not interested. The wedding is still off, and I'm moving on." It felt good to take control of the narrative, to make it clear that I wasn't going to be manipulated into giving her another chance. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me felt guilty for cutting her off so abruptly. After all, we'd spent years together, and a small part of me still wanted answers. But the larger part of me knew that nothing she could say would change what she'd done. She had disrespected me, abandoned me, and shattered my trust. That wasn't something an apology could fix. As I started sorting through the remnants of our relationship, shared accounts, canceled bookings, her things in my apartment, I felt a sense of closure. Each task was like closing a chapter in a book I no longer wanted to read. I even changed the locks on my apartment, just in case she decided to show up unannounced. I wasn't going to let her waltz back into my life like nothing had happened. By the time Thursday rolled around, I felt lighter. Lena might have been flying back, but I wasn't waiting for her. I was moving on, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of the fallout from her decisions. But for now, I was content to take things one step at a time, rebuilding my life without her in it. Thursday came and went, and I didn't give Lena's return a second thought. She'd sent her flight details earlier in the week as if I was supposed to drop everything, drive to the airport, and welcome her home with open arms. I didn't. Why would I? This wasn't a movie where the estranged couple reunites in a flurry of apologies and tears. This was real life, and in real life, actions have consequences. It was late in the afternoon when my phone buzzed with yet another unknown number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Hello?" I said, already bracing myself. "It's me," came Lena's voice, calm and casual, as if we'd just spoken yesterday. "I'm back. Can you pick me up?" I let out a dry laugh before responding. "Lena, what's that got to do with me?" The silence on her end was deafening. For a moment, I thought the line had dropped, but then I heard her hesitant breath. We should talk, right? Talk? Now she wanted to talk? After 5 weeks of ghosting me, after blocking me on everything, after casually suggesting a break while walking into airport security, now she thought we needed to talk? The audacity of it all made me laugh again, this time louder. "I don't think so," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. Then, just as she had done to me, I hung up and blocked her. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, like I'd finally regained the upper hand. But the truth is, I didn't feel much of anything in that moment. Just a hollow kind of relief, like I'd passed a test I hadn't signed up for. Blocking her felt like closing the door on something that had already been dead for weeks. There was no satisfaction in it, only the cold comfort of knowing I was doing what was necessary. Later that evening, my phone started buzzing again. This time, it wasn't from an unknown number. It was the group chat Lena and I shared with our friends and family. Apparently, she decided to make her grand return there, too. Her first message was simple: "I'm back. Can we talk?" The responses rolled in almost immediately. People were curious, confused. Someone asked, "Is everything okay?" Another said, "We heard the wedding's off. What happened?" I stayed quiet, waiting to see how Lena would handle it. She didn't say much, just asked me again, directly this time, to call her. "This is between us," she added, as if that somehow erased the fact that she'd made it everyone's business by disappearing in the first place. That was my breaking point. I hadn't wanted to air our dirty laundry, but Lena had forced my hand. I typed out a message, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. "Lena," I began. "This stopped being between us when you decided to walk out of my life without a conversation and blocked me for 5 weeks. If you want to explain yourself, you can do it right here." The chat went quiet for a moment, the little dots of someone typing flickering on and off as people decided whether or not to weigh in. Finally, someone chimed in, "That's fair. What's going on, Lena?" She didn't answer right away. I could imagine her sitting there, staring at her phone, trying to come up with an excuse that would make her look like the victim. And sure enough, when she finally responded, it was the same tired story I'd heard secondhand from mutual friends. "I was overwhelmed," she wrote. "The wedding planning, work, everything. It just gotta be too much. I thought Alex would understand that I needed some space." Some space? I couldn't stop myself from replying. Space is one thing. Blocking your fiancé on everything and disappearing for 5 weeks is another. "You didn't just need space, Lena. You abandoned me." Her response was immediate, defensive. "I didn't think it would go this far. I thought we'd work it out when I got back." I stared at her message, feeling a familiar mix of anger and sadness. Did she really think she could just hit pause on our relationship, vanish without a word, and then pick up where we left off like nothing happened? I couldn't decide if she was delusional, arrogant, or both. That's when my friend Ben jumped in. "Lena," he wrote, "you can't just drop a break on someone, block them, and then expect them to wait around for you. That's not how relationships work. I appreciated his support, but I didn't need anyone else to fight my battles. I typed out one final message: Lena, you made your decision when you walked away. I've made mine. The wedding is off, and so are we. I'm done. The silence that followed was deafening. No one else in the chat said a word, not even Lena. I imagined her sitting there, reading my words over and over, realizing that this time, she couldn't talk her way out of it. The rest of the night passed quietly. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of peace. Lena was back, but it didn't matter. I wasn't waiting for her anymore. I wasn't hoping for an explanation or holding out for an apology. I was done, and for the first time, I truly believed it. What I didn't know was that Lena wasn't ready to let go, and her next moves would make it clear just how far she was willing to go to rewrite the narrative. If I thought Lena's return would bring some kind of closure, I was dead wrong. Instead, it opened the door to a whole new level of chaos. Her attempts to explain herself in the group chat were weak at best, but what followed was a full-on campaign to shift the blame and paint me as the villain. It started subtly. A couple of days after I shut her down in the group chat, I got a text from Megan, one of Lena's bridesmaids. Megan and I had always been friendly, but we weren't close. So, when she messaged me out of the blue saying, "Hey, I just wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" I knew something was up. "Fine," I replied. "Why do you ask?" "Well," she began, "Lena's been really upset. She told us she didn't mean for things to get this bad. She said she just needed some time to think about the wedding and didn't know how to tell you. Maybe you should hear her out." There it was, the start of Lena's spin campaign. I could feel the frustration rising as I typed back, "Megan, she didn't just need time. She blocked me for 5 weeks. That's not how you handle stress. She cut me off and left me to pick up the pieces." Megan paused before responding. "I get that," she said, "but maybe she was scared. Weddings can be overwhelming, you know?" I couldn't believe what I was reading. Was everyone just going to make excuses for Lena? Did no one care about what she'd done to me? I ended the conversation quickly, thanking Megan for reaching out, but making it clear I wasn't interested in hearing more. The next day, Lena's sister, Emily, called me. Now, Emily and I had always gotten along. She'd even joked at one point that I was more like a brother than a future brother-in-law. So when she called, I foolishly thought she might be trying to mediate. I was wrong. "Alex," she began, her tone stern, "why did you cancel the wedding without talking to Lena first?" I almost dropped the phone. "Are you serious, Emily? She blocked me. How was I supposed to talk to her?" "Well, she was overwhelmed," Emily said, echoing Megan's sentiment. "You should have waited until she got back to sort things out. Canceling everything was drastic." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Drastic? Emily. She walked out of my life without a word. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to decide when she wanted to be in this relationship. She made her choice, so I made mine. Emily tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. "Look," I said, "I get that you're trying to stick up for your sister, but she disrespected me and our relationship. If she wanted to work things out, she should have talked to me instead of running away." She sighed, clearly frustrated, but eventually gave up and ended the call. I thought that would be the end of it, but Lena wasn't done. If anything, she doubled down. Later that evening, I got a screenshot from my friend Adam. It was from another group chat I wasn't a part of, and it was Lena talking to her friends. In the messages, she painted herself as the victim, claiming she had been overwhelmed by the wedding and didn't know how to tell Alex she needed time. She even went as far as to say, "I thought he'd understand, but instead, he overreacted and canceled everything before I had a chance to explain." Reading those messages made my blood boil. She was twisting the story to make it seem like I was the irrational one, like I'd acted impulsively instead of responding to her outright abandonment. I couldn't let her get away with it. So, I went back to our shared group chat and laid it all out. For anyone who's confused, I wrote, "Lena blocked me on everything for 5 weeks and disappeared without a conversation. I canceled the wedding because I'm not going to wait around for someone who doesn't respect me or our relationship. That's the truth." The reactions were immediate. Friends and family started chiming in, expressing their support. "That's so messed up," one wrote. "You don't treat someone like that." Another added, "Good for you, Alex. You deserve better." Even Ben, one of Lena's college friends, jumped in. "Lena," he said, "you can't just ghost someone and expect everything to be fine when you come back. Alex is right, this is on you." For a moment, it felt like the tide was turning. People were starting to see through Lena's manipulation. But then her friend Amelia decided to step in. Amelia had always been a bit of an instigator, and true to form, she tried to stir the pot. "Alex," she wrote, "you don't know what Lena was going through. Planning a wedding is stressful, and sometimes people make mistakes. Maybe you should have been more understanding instead of canceling everything." I took a deep breath before responding. "Amelia, this isn't about wedding stress. This is about the fact that Lena blocked me, ghosted me, and didn't make any effort to communicate. I called. I texted. I got nothing. If she didn't want to be with me, she could have said that. Instead, she disappeared. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." The group chat went silent after that. I could tell people were finally starting to understand just how bad things really were. Even Amelia didn't have much to say after I laid it all out. But Lena wasn't done. Over the next few days, she sent messages, tried calling from different numbers, and even sent mutual friends to talk to me. Each time, I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story or manipulate me into giving her another chance. It was exhausting, but every time I defended myself, I felt stronger. Lena might have been trying to shift the blame, but I wasn't about to let her. I knew the truth, and I wasn't afraid to stand by it. Little did I know, her desperation was only going to escalate from here. Just when I thought Lena's attempts at damage control couldn't get any more ridiculous, she decided to escalate things. After days of her family and friends trying to convince me to hear her out, I finally got a text directly from her, sent from yet another random number. It was a long, rambling message filled with everything from apologies to excuses. I knew I shouldn't read it, but curiosity got the better of me. And that's when I saw it, the bombshell that shifted everything. Somewhere in the middle of her long, melodramatic explanation, she admitted, "While I was in South Asia, I kissed someone. It was a moment of weakness, but it didn't mean anything. I was confused and scared about the wedding. I didn't know what to do." I reread that part at least 10 times, hoping I'd misinterpreted it. But there it was, plain as day. Not only had she abandoned me, ghosted me, and blocked me, but now she was confessing to betrayal, calling it a moment of weakness, as if that somehow made it less significant. My stomach churned as I processed her words. This wasn't just about a break. It wasn't just about needing space. She had actively chosen to betray the trust we'd spent 6 years building. The audacity of it all left me stunned. She actually thought she could admit to kissing someone else, brush it off as a mistake, and then ask me to move past it like nothing had happened. Her message ended with a plea. "I still want to marry you, Alex. Please let's work through this." I stared at my phone, my hands shaking, not with sadness, but with anger. Was she serious? After everything she had done, did she really believe we could just sweep this under the rug? Betrayal wasn't something you could fix with a few half-hearted apologies and promises to do better. For a few moments, I considered responding, maybe to ask her why, maybe to let her know how deeply she had hurt me, maybe to make her understand that this wasn't something I could forgive. But as I sat there, staring at her words, I realized it didn't matter. Nothing she said would change what she had done. Nothing would erase the fact that she had disrespected me, our relationship, and the future we'd planned together. Instead of replying, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I blocked her number, deleted her message, and sat back in silence. It was a strange feeling, part anger, part relief. I didn't feel the closure I wanted, but I felt a sense of finality. This was it. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. As the hours passed, I thought more about her so-called moment of weakness. What did it even mean? Was it just a kiss, or was there more she wasn't telling me? Honestly, I didn't care to know. Whether it was a single kiss or something more, the trust between us was gone. And without trust, there was no foundation to rebuild on. That evening, I called my best friend, Adam, to vent. She admitted to kissing someone, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. And she still thinks we can get married. Adam was silent for a moment, and then he sighed. Alex, you dodged a bullet. Imagine if this had come out after you got married. She's showing you exactly who she is, someone who can't handle challenges without running away or betraying you. He was right, of course. As painful as it was to accept, Lena's actions had revealed her true character. The person I thought I knew, the supportive, loving partner who would always have my back, wasn't real. Or maybe she had been real once, but that version of Lena didn't exist anymore. What was left was someone I could never trust again. In the days that followed, I started taking steps to protect myself. I changed the locks on my apartment again, just in case she still had a spare key. I went through every shared account we had and made sure her name was removed. I even started thinking about taking a trip of my own, something to clear my head and put distance between me and this whole mess. If Lena could fly halfway across the world to find herself, then I could do the same without the betrayal part. As I took these steps, I realized something important. This wasn't just about Lena. It was about me, what I was willing to accept, what I deserved, and what I wouldn't tolerate in the future. Lena had shown me what she was capable of, and I wasn't going to make the mistake of ignoring it. By the end of the week, I felt lighter. Not happy, exactly, but freer. Lena had tried to shift the blame, paint herself as a victim, and now justify her betrayal. But I wasn't buying it. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. What I didn't expect, though, was that Lena wasn't done. Her confession might have been the final straw for me, but for her, it was just the beginning of a new round of desperate attempts to win me back. And as much as I wanted to put it all behind me, I was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to rewrite our story. I thought Lena's confession was the final nail in the coffin. I had blocked her, cut off communication, and resolved to move on. But apparently, Lena didn't share my sense of finality. If anything, her behavior escalated, veering from desperate attempts at reconciliation to something that felt disturbingly obsessive. It started with subtle signs. One night, as I came home late from work, I noticed a car parked down the street that looked suspiciously familiar. I didn't think much of it at first, just a coincidence, I told myself. But then, a few days later, I caught a glimpse of the same car while running errands. I brushed it off, assuming I was being paranoid. That illusion shattered when I received a handwritten letter in my mailbox. The sight of Lena's handwriting made my stomach churn. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was long, pages and pages of apologies, explanations, and declarations of love. She claimed she had panicked about the wedding and made mistakes she deeply regretted. She said she was willing to do whatever it took to fix things, even mentioning that she had booked us appointments with a couples counselor. I stared at that part of the letter in disbelief. She actually thought she could take control of the situation like this, planning counseling sessions without even asking me. It was arrogant, delusional, and completely out of line. Then, buried near the end of the letter, was the part that sent chills down my spine. I still have the key to your apartment, so if you want to talk, I'll come by any time. The fact that she thought she could just let herself into my home was beyond unsettling. Thankfully, I had already changed the locks after our breakup, but the sheer audacity of her statement made me furious. It was clear Lena didn't see boundaries as something she needed to respect. I responded the only way I could. I wrote her a letter back. I kept it short and direct. Lena, we are done. Do not contact me again. Return the key you have, even though I've changed the locks. This is over. Please move on. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. But Lena wasn't done. A week later, another letter arrived, this one shorter but no less unsettling. She claimed to understand my decision, but then mentioned she'd driven by my apartment a couple of times and noticed I wasn't home. That line stopped me cold. Was she watching me? Was she waiting for an opportunity to show up unannounced? The thought alone made my skin crawl. At that point, I realized I couldn't ignore this any longer. Lena's behavior had crossed a line, and I needed to protect myself. I called my landlord to discuss adding extra security measures. Cameras, stronger locks, anything to make sure she couldn't invade my space. I wasn't going to let her turn my home into a place of anxiety and fear. Then came the call from my mom. "You're not going to believe who showed up here today," she said. her voice dripping with disbelief. My heart sank. "Lena," she said. "She came to the house unannounced, asking to talk about the two of you. She said she just wanted to explain everything and get your mom's advice." I couldn't believe it. Lena had gone from pestering me to dragging my family into her mess. "What did you tell her?" I asked, my voice sharp. "I told her to leave," my mom said firmly. "I told her you've made your decision, and she needs to respect that." She cried a little, tried to plead her case, but I didn't budge. "Alex, this girl is not okay." Hearing my mom stand up for me gave me a moment of relief, but it also cemented just how far Lena was willing to go. This wasn't just about reconciliation anymore. It was about control. She couldn't stand the idea that I was moving on without her, so she was trying to claw her way back into my life by any means necessary. That night, I decided enough was enough. I contacted an attorney to discuss filing a restraining order. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. I hated the idea of escalating things further. But Lena's behavior had gone beyond desperation. It was invasive and potentially dangerous. I wasn't going to wait for her to show up at my door or, worse, try to involve herself in my life in some other way. I needed to set a firm boundary, one she couldn't ignore. When Lena was served with the restraining order, I half expected another flurry of messages or letters. But to my surprise, the silence was immediate. No more letters. No more calls from mutual friends or family. No more sightings of her car lurking near my apartment. It was as if she'd finally realized I wasn't going to budge. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of her constant intrusions lifted, and I began to feel like I could focus on my life, on my future, without the shadow of Lena looming over me. I had taken the steps to protect my peace, and that decision was already paying off. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal had taught me an important lesson. Boundaries aren't just about keeping others out. They're about protecting the space you need to grow and thrive. And Lena? She had made it clear that she didn't respect boundaries, trust, or me. Filing the restraining order wasn't just about keeping her away. It was about reclaiming my life. When the restraining order was served, I thought it would be the end of the story. I imagined Lena finally accepting reality and moving on. For a few days, the silence was blissful. No letters, no unexpected calls, no interference from her friends or family. It was the kind of peace I hadn't felt in weeks. But of course, it wasn't over. Not yet. A week later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. At first, I thought it might be another letter from Lena, but the handwriting wasn't hers. When I opened it, I found a typed note from her mother, Laura, asking me to meet for coffee to discuss the situation. I nearly laughed out loud. The situation? Was she serious? Her daughter had crossed every line imaginable, and now she wanted to have a polite chat about it over lattes? I ignored the note, but the next day, I got a call from Laura. I didn't pick up. Then came a string of texts. "Alex, please, let's talk. Lena is heartbroken, and I just want to help fix this. We can't let 6 years go to waste." Fix this? There was nothing to fix. I blocked her number and hoped that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, there she was, Laura, standing on my doorstep with a pleading expression. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to open the door or call the police. Against my better judgment, I opened it, keeping the chain locked. "Alex," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy, "I just want to talk." I kept my tone as calm as I could. "Laura, this isn't appropriate. Your daughter and I are done. There's nothing to talk about." She sighed dramatically, as if I were being unreasonable. "You don't understand. Lena's been crying every day. She made a mistake, yes, but she's ready to do whatever it takes to make it right. Don't you think you owe her that chance?" I felt my jaw tighten. "What I owe her," I said slowly, "is exactly what she gave me. Nothing. She blocked me, abandoned me, and betrayed me. That's not something you come back from." Laura shook her head, her expression shifting to something colder. "You're being stubborn, Alex. Marriage is about forgiveness. If you can't forgive her, maybe you weren't ready to get married in the first place." That was it. I slammed the door in her face and walked away, my hands shaking with anger. I couldn't believe the nerve of this woman, standing in my home, trying to guilt me into taking her daughter back. It was clear now where Lena had learned her manipulative tendencies. The next day, I filed an official complaint, citing the restraining order. I wasn't going to let this continue. If they wanted to push me, I'd push back harder. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It was from Lena. "I just want to talk one last time," she wrote. "I promise I'll leave you alone after that. Please, Alex, just give me 5 minutes." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to block the number and move on. But another part of me, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, wanted closure. I wanted to look her in the eye and tell her everything she had done to destroy us. I wanted to make her understand that there was no coming back from this. So, against my better judgment, I agreed. I told her to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop near my apartment. I figured a public setting would be safe, and if she tried anything, I could leave. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with a nervous expression. She looked up as I walked in, her face lighting up with hope. I sat down across from her, folding my arms. "You've got 5 minutes," I said flatly. She launched into a long-winded apology, talking about how she had been overwhelmed, how she didn't know how to communicate her feelings, how the kiss in South Asia meant nothing. She claimed she'd been scared of the commitment and didn't know how to handle the pressure of the wedding. I let her speak, my face unreadable. When she finally stopped, looking at me with watery eyes, I took a deep breath and said, "Do you even hear yourself, Lena? You didn't just run away. You blocked me, disappeared for weeks, and then came back expecting everything to be fine. That's not fear. That's selfishness." She tried to interrupt, but I held up a hand. "No, you had your turn. Now it's mine. You betrayed me, not just with that kiss, but with your actions. You left me to pick up the pieces of a life we built together while you went off to find yourself. And now you want me to forgive you? To pretend none of this happened? I can't do that." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But then she just nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I stood up, grabbing my jacket. "Intentions don't matter, Lena. Actions do. And your actions showed me exactly where I stand with you. Goodbye." I walked out without looking back, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt free, not just from Lena, but from the anger and hurt that had been weighing me down. This was the final chapter, and I had closed it on my own terms. Whatever came next, I knew it wouldn't include her. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Walking away from that coffee shop was the first real step toward closure. For weeks, I had been caught in the chaos of Lena's manipulation, her family's interference, and the emotional fallout of a broken engagement. But in that moment, as I left her sitting there with tears in her eyes, I realized something crucial. I was free. Free from the guilt, the second-guessing, and the endless cycle of what-ifs that had consumed me since she first walked out of my life. The days that followed felt lighter, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. For so long, my life had revolved around Lena and our future together. Planning the wedding, talking about her dreams, compromising on mine to make room for hers. Now, I had the chance to rebuild, to figure out what I wanted without worrying about someone else's expectations. The first thing I did was reclaim my space. I threw away the little things she'd left behind. A scarf, an old toothbrush, a half-empty bottle of her favorite shampoo. It wasn't about being petty. It was about taking back control of my surroundings. I rearranged the furniture, bought new sheets, even replaced the artwork on the walls. My apartment no longer felt like a shared space filled with memories of us. It felt like mine. I also started saying yes to things I'd put off for years. Friends invited me out for dinner or drinks, and I went. I joined a gym, not to distract myself, but because I finally had the mental energy to take care of my body. I even started planning a trip of my own, a solo getaway to clear my head and remind myself that I didn't need someone else to validate my happiness. As I made these changes, I couldn't help but reflect on the relationship. Lena and I had shared 6 years together, but looking back, I saw things differently. The signs of her selfishness, Her inability to handle pressure, her tendency to run from problems. They had been there all along. I had ignored them, convinced myself that love was enough to overcome them. But love isn't just about feelings. It's about trust, respect, and the willingness to face challenges together. And Lena had failed on all counts. One day, while sorting through old photos and keepsakes, I came across the wedding invitation proofs we had picked out together. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. We were supposed to grow old together, build a life, maybe even have kids someday. But as quickly as the sadness came, it passed. That life wasn't real. It was an illusion, built on a foundation of trust that she had shattered. Instead of dwelling on what could have been, I focused on what was ahead. I had learned some hard truths through this experience, lessons I would carry with me into the future. I learned the importance of boundaries, real boundaries that protect your peace and self-worth. I learned that trust isn't something you can repair with an apology, especially when it's been broken so deeply. And most importantly, I learned that I deserve a partner who values me as much as I value them. As the weeks turned into months, the drama surrounding Lena finally faded. The texts, calls, and letters stopped, and I heard through mutual friends that she had finally moved on. I didn't feel relief or triumph, just indifference. She was a chapter in my life, and now that chapter was closed. For the first time in a long time, I started looking forward to the future. I didn't know what it held, but I was ready to face it on my own terms. I wasn't the same person I had been when Lena first dropped her bombshell. I was stronger, more self-aware, and more confident in my ability to stand up for myself. In the end, walking away from Lena wasn't just about ending a toxic relationship. It was about choosing myself, choosing to prioritize my happiness, my peace, and my future over the mess she had tried to drag me into. And as I sat in my newly rearranged apartment, sipping coffee and planning my trip, I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt free. This wasn't the ending I had envisioned, but it was the one I needed. Lena had shown me who she truly was, and I had made the choice to walk away. Now, with the weight of that decision behind me, I was ready to move forward, not with her, but with myself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly at peace.